Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the UR 2020 community session organized by the Singapore Civil Defence Force. I'm Lieutenant Jadine and I'll be your MC for today. Before we begin, please allow me to bring everyone through the program for the session. The topic for this session is virtual reality and the future of training for emergency responders in a post-COVID-19 era. The keynote speaker for this session is Lieutenant Colonel Lee Soon Huat. In his current appointment as the head of the Responder Performance Center in the Civil Defence Academy, Lieutenant Colonel Lee spearheads the development of virtual reality training systems and drives research work pertaining to emergency responders' performance. He will be sharing on SCDF's training and learning transformation journey and how virtual reality has reshaped the way it conducts its training for emergency responders. After the keynote presentation, there will be a panel discussion with key senior members of the training and learning fraternity in SCDF. Joining Lieutenant Colonel Lee as panelist is Assistant Commissioner Alan Chow. Assistant Commissioner Alan Chow is the director of the Civil Defence Academy. You are strongly encouraged to put up your questions to the panelists. You may send in your questions at any time during the session by clicking on the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. When putting forth your questions, please do indicate if it is to be addressed to any specific panelist or if the question is open for the entire panel to answer. Without further ado, I shall now hand over the time to Lieutenant Colonel Lee Soon Huat to give his keynote presentation. Sir, please.
Good morning, I'm Lieutenant Colonel Lee Soon Huat, Head of the Responders Performance Center of the Civil Defence Academy, Singapore Civil Defence Force. Today I'll be giving a presentation on virtual reality and the future of training for emergency responders in a post-COVID-19 era. This is the scope of my presentation for today. Before I go into the training and learning of Singapore Civil Defence Force, or SCDF, I would like to take a bit of time to share on Singapore's profile, the challenges that we face, and the driving forces behind SCDF's plans for futuristic training. With the onset of globalization and rapid human development, Singapore has felt the effects of a densely populated and a densely built-up operating environment in recent years. At the same time, the steadily aging population has also posed a demographic challenge in which a shrinking workforce will need to support an increasing proportion of elderly dependents. Given the scarcity of our resources, there is an increasing trend of buildings going higher with super high-rise structures to accommodate the growing population. The picture on the left shows a 50-story super high-rise public residential housing in the middle of our central business district area. As one of the world's leading energy and chemical industry hubs, Singapore's contribution to the industry is significant and has led to the extensive development of Jurong Island, an integrated complex housing many of the world's leading energy and chemical companies. Jewel, which is located within Changi Airport, is a mixed-use complex featuring over 300 shops and F&B outlets with a canopy park and a 40-meter-tall indoor waterfall. In addition to this, Singapore is also home to one of the world's busiest land checkpoints, which is also known as the Woodland Checkpoints, which is at the north of Singapore. As the nation's life-saving force, the SCDF has to ensure that our emergency response strategy remains sound and robust, so that we are always a few steps ahead of the constantly evolving challenges. We must always be ready when called upon to respond. SCDF engaged in 5 primary roles and functions such as firefighting and rescue, hazardous material mitigation, provision of emergency medical service such as pre-hospital medical care, fire safety, compliance and public protection management such as the public warning system, the emergency broadcast system, and civil defense shelters. We also do community engagement to raise level of emergency preparedness among our citizens. Today, the SCDF is made up of a headquarters with 4 SCDF land divisions and a marine division. We have to date 20 land fire stations and 2 marine fire stations, which are complemented by 29 fire posts for effective island-wide emergency response. We also have 1 training institute, the Civil Defence Academy, where we train our emergency responders, including international participants and now national servicemen respectively. This slide gives an overview of the number of emergency calls the SCDF has responded over the last 10 years. Classified according to the 4 main types of emergency calls, the top row shows the fire and emergency medical service calls, and the bottom row shows rescue incidents and those involving hazardous materials. We believe that training as we operate is the key to success in our operations. This philosophy is the backbone of the training and learning framework in SCDF, which we will discuss later. Since the COVID-19 pandemic first surfaced in early 2020, SCDF has faced some challenges in conducting effective training while staying true to our philosophy of training as we operate. Given the propensity for rapid spread of COVID-19, social distancing has become the norm in many parts of the world, impacting the way that companies and organizations operate from day to day. In SCDF, apart from addressing the need for social distancing, we also have introduced staggered working shift and other exposure-reducing measures. While adapting to the new norm was not easy, for the training and development community, we used this opportunity to change the way in which our courses were designed and delivered. Instructor-led training has been the standard for so long that we saw a need to reskill in order to be proficient with remote training and meetings platform. License or access to technology such as Zoom and Skype was made available to all staff. They also allow training and guides to be provided based on the key tools that were available. These key tools provided some consistency so that the trainees were neither confused nor rushed into the different learning tools. When preparing a virtual training session, the trainer must also recognize the need for more interaction, which can be achieved by incorporating more questions and answer sessions, more engaging visual aids, more video, more polls, and more breakout sessions. No doubt, COVID-19 has changed the world and brought about major disruption to many businesses. For the training industry, we can count ourselves among the lucky ones, as we have viable options in online training to continue operating during these challenging times. From there, we realized that learning is just one of the first steps in SCDF training and learning transformation roadmap. Let us now look at each of our strategic thrusts in details. Leveraging technology and digitalization as enablers is the main pillar behind the development of our training ecosystem, which includes the training and learning enterprise system, which is called Talents, and the training management system 2.0. While the usage of system is nothing new, we strive to go a step further, tailoring these systems to the needs, strengths, and inclinations of our officers. We have also made the effort to ensure that these systems complement each other well with seamless sharing and analysis of information across various platforms. The establishment of the Emergency Response Fitness Conditioning and Enhancement Lab, also known as EXCEL, is a significant milestone in our drive to harness technology as a force multiplier for our frontliners. Intensive research and development will be carried out on critical aspects of human performance and fire science, giving our responders an edge in unlocking their hidden potential and working around potential hazards in their operating environment. In today's world, every bit of advantage will prove crucial to our responders, as the threats and hazards faced by them are more complex and dynamic. As we are striving to achieve breakthroughs in technology and human factors, we are also mindful of the fact that we must remain open to partnerships and collaboration with like-minded partners around the world. With the rapid advancement of technology and learning methodology, trending technology today will become obsolete soon. Therefore, we cannot afford to work in silo, but must forge connections with partners in relevant fields, exchanging best practices and pointers in our respective community of practice. So far, we have covered the technological aspect of training and learning. However, the human side of it is just as important. This is where we have to change mindsets about learning by encouraging continuous education throughout an officer's career, enhancing the skill sets and professionalism of our workforce consistently. Given that the bulk of learning is best done on the job, we have adjusted our approach to encourage more experiential learning and micro-learning at the workplace. We have also bear in mind that learners are more inclined to absorbing knowledge in short, bite-sized pieces. This gives rise to our approach of micro-learning, in which we tailored our e-learning content to be more concise, brief, and easy to understand. These are some of the initiatives that SCDF has embarked on throughout the years. In the later part of my presentation, I will elaborate on some of these initiatives. Using virtual reality to deliver training is something that we can explore on top of just online learning during this period. The use of extended reality allows SCDF to simulate real-world situations, giving our trainees the opportunity to gain experience in a controlled environment. This type of training is particularly useful for first responders who are likely to encounter situations where there is no room for error. A single mistake will have severe consequences, making it somewhat risky to carry out on-the-job learning during a life or death situation. This is where extended reality can come in as a stressor and mental rehearsal for officers, where they can learn the ropes in a safe environment before moving on to the real world. Learning in an extended reality environment has been found to not only increase the retention of skills, but also allows trainees to develop muscle memories for specific tasks. And more importantly, extended reality offers a feasible option for remote learning for learners at home that is unable to attend on-site training. In the second quarter of next year, I am pleased to share with you that we will be officially launching our virtual learning lab in our academy. Allow me to show you a video of the advanced command training system tool that we are currently using in our academy.
I'm Lieutenant Colonel Serban Hui with the Singapore Civil Defence Force. Currently, I'm the Deputy Director for Development at the Civil Defence Academy. The Singapore Civil Defence Force is one of 11 agencies under the Ministry of Home Affairs in Singapore. Our entrusted mission is to protect and save lives and property for a safe and secure Singapore, and we envisage to be a world-leading life-saving force. ACTS stands for Advanced Command Training System. It is a state-of-the-art system that leverages on virtual reality simulations to create realistic training scenarios which help bridge training gaps between classroom and in-field training. Training scenarios which are complex or difficult to simulate with conventional training facilities can now be created using the ACTS system with ease. Trainers can recreate scenes in the virtual world to effectively illustrate complex concepts for greater understanding.
I'm Captain Ron Chua. I'm a course commander in the Leadership Development Center of the Singapore Civil Defence Academy. ACTS enables us as instructors to create scenarios that are unique to their geographical area, recreate specific incidents for training reviews or debriefs. The ability to coordinate multiple trainees who are geographically separated from me reduces the hassle we face in conducting the training centrally in the academy. Scenario 1 is a recreation of an oil tank fire incident. In this scenario, the trainee takes on the role of a commander. Here, she is trained in her command and control skills.
I'm Captain Jie Hui. I'm commander from Yishun Fire Station. My role oversees the day-to-day operation of a station, as well as turning out for all the rescue and fire incidents in Singapore. In real-life operations, we don't always encounter such big-scale incident like an oil tank incident. So for ACTS, they actually designed an oil tank scenario for all of us to go through it to understand some of the consideration factor in a big-scale environment.
Another use of ACTS is to facilitate self-directed learning. Officers can enter the virtual world on a computer anywhere and receive training at their own pace and convenience. Here, the trainee is responding to a road traffic accident in a VR simulation. The trainee is required to answer multiple choice questions that will test his or her ability to respond to such a situation. The best thing is that this form of training can be done anytime and anywhere. Scenario 3 is an urban search and rescue recreation. Here, an instructor can guide a trainee within a VR environment to show various search and rescue techniques such as lie and hail.
There's two main things I really like about the training I just went through. First is that it replicates an urban search and rescue scenario, which we don't always get to observe in real life. And also second is the convenience of this training. It can be conducted remotely and at our convenience. It was very interesting for me to witness all of this in a virtual world, and I really like the experience. I can't wait
One of the most critical components in the performance of an emergency responder is reaction time. Reaction time is the interval between the moment we perceive something to the moment that we respond to it. In a highly uncertain and dynamic environment, the slightest hesitation can have serious consequences. Imagine a situation where a trainee is inside a virtual oil refinery while being severely tested with various firefighting situations and injects by his trainer. Based on the information that he could gather in the virtual environment, trained to make the optimal decision. Actions that are taken within the virtual environment provided us with the opportunity to evaluate and analyze responder performance. The trainee's interaction, movement, and gaze within the virtual environment can also be analyzed in an analytic dashboard to help us better understand his decision process. We understand that for virtual reality training and learning to be successful, it's essential to integrate a back-end portal that records the trainee's psychological and physiological data in the forms of graphs and charts encapsulated insightful metrics like virtual spatial memory, heart rate, number of trials and errors. This is what we hope to achieve in the near future for all our extended reality projects. I would also like to share that within Excel, we will have facilities that allow us to run trials for these initiatives. One example is the Cognitive Lab and STRIVE, which stands for Strength and Conditioning and Rehabilitation in a Virtual Environment. The Excel is another state-of-the-art facility in the region, designed to monitor, access, and enhance different aspects of an emergency responder's performance. Excel will also look into different areas to enhance the physiological and psychological response of emergency responders during training and operation, with a broad focus on physiology and safety, mental resilience, and human performance. While harnessing cutting-edge technology to enhance training outcomes is indeed a game changer, it is only one part of the equation. We need a comprehensive training ecosystem that can formulate a structured path of learning and development for our officers so that they can realize their potential and aspirations. Allow me to spend a few minutes to discuss SCDF Integrated One-Stop Training Administration IT web portal, which incorporates the different functions and features of the existing IT training administration system in SCDF. By leveraging on data analytics, the three main modules of the training ecosystem will focus on different aspects of an officer's development journey: analytics, training application, and training administration. The implementation of data analytics and sequential algorithm into the training ecosystem is fundamental to the modus operandi of the training system cycle. In essence, data analytics consolidates the individual officer's training attributes and the models of data into officers' potential qualities based on the predetermined sets of points mapped out on the competency development model. Apart from measuring SCDF competency profile, data analytics will also identify training gaps in individual officers' predetermined core development matrix. At a glance, an officer will be able to identify the areas in which he has yet to achieve in terms of competency, thereby promoting self-directed learning towards his desired goal. The training ecosystem will recommend training catalogs for the officer to potentially enhance their competency level or eligibility in clearing their mandatory proficiency tests. Peripheral features within the training system will also be upgraded with artificial intelligence. For example, in the administration of course, a system aggregator consolidates all types of resources fundamental in carrying out a training session, and the resource engine will automatically recommend resources based on the suitability of timing, location, availability, and expertise, as example. Through this example, we can see that the human is still the main focus in this initiative. However, with a slight nudge from technology, our officers will have the clearer picture of their own development path. They will be encouraged to take concrete steps towards fulfilling their own potential. Science and technology is an essential force multiplier in SCDF. Although it will not replace existing physical type of firefighting training, but to better position ourselves to deal with future challenges, we must continue to leverage on innovation and technology to enhance both training and operations to meet future demands and achieve effective outcomes. With that, I've come to the end of my presentation. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Lieutenant Colonel Lee, for the informative presentation. We will now commence the panel discussion. Joining us today are Assistant Commissioner Alan Chow and Lieutenant Colonel Lee Soon Huat. Good morning, sirs. Before we begin, AC Alan, sir, would you like to introduce yourself to the audience?
Good morning, Jadine. And first and foremost, I would like to extend our thanks to the organizers of the Understanding Risk Forum itself for allowing the SCDF to do our sharing. I'm Assistant Commissioner Alan Chow, Director of Civil Defence Academy. Together with me this morning is the presenter, Lieutenant Colonel Lee Soon Huat, who is the head of the Responder Performance Center, one of the 6 centers in the Civil Defence Academy. So we'll be happy to take any questions or queries that you have with regards to the presentation that has just taken place. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Shall we now look at a question from the audience? The first question is, what were the driving forces that compelled SCDF to be an early adopter of VR training in the early 21st century? This question is open to the entire panel.
All right. Since Soon Huat has done a lot of the sharing earlier, I think I will then take this question first to get the ball rolling. Okay. I think there are 3 key fundamental driving factors. One is the need for resource optimization. I think we all know that resources are limited, and actually whenever you plan any kind of training scenario, a lot of resources, whether it's time, venue, manpower, equipment, goes into the planning of scenarios. So with VR, it actually gives us a great edge over increasing the efficiency of how the scenarios itself can be quickly planned, created, and then applied for the use of training. I think the second point is about increasing efficiency, which is very much linked to the first point. With the creation of scenarios that can be quickly applied in the virtual environment itself, our trainees can go through the training in a very efficient manner. And actually, for an organization like the SCDF, where about 50% of our frontliners are conscripts who serve about 2 years of national service, expedient training is actually very important, because the more time that our frontliners spend in training itself, the less time at deployment. So I think the need for efficiency is something that is also a driving factor. Lastly, I will speak a bit about effectiveness of training. In fact, sorry, I will just want to touch a bit more about efficiency. All right, I think Soon Huat spoke a bit earlier also about the rise of more complex scenarios, unconventional threats, etc. Yeah, and these kinds of scenarios are difficult to replicate in an actual environment. So what we do is that in the VR environment, this can actually be created quite quickly and efficiently. All right, now I'll touch on effectiveness. I think traditionally, training is conducted by teaching people the theory of response procedure, and then after that subjecting them to an exercise, a physical response exercise. VR allows us to bridge that gap. What we can do now is, after teaching and making sure that our trainees understand the theory of response, we can subject them to virtual deployment, like a tabletop exercise, but done in a VR environment itself, to familiarize them with the response procedures, etc., before they are subjected to the actual physical deployment exercise. And this actually, from our experience, has shown that it's more effective, because the trainees get a chance to practice it in a logical thinking platform before exercising it on the ground. And I think this greatly enhanced the effectiveness. So these are probably the 3 key driving factors. All right.
Thank you, sir, for sharing. We will move on to the second question. We have a second question from the audience, which is, how can VR training translate to tangible enhancement in operation? Colonel Lee, would you like to take on this question?
Okay, as I shared earlier on, right, one of the unique thing about VR training that is it allows the so-called learner to be able to immerse in a so-called environment that allows them to feel that they are actually physically present. For example, one of the key things that we do in the area of firefighting is to be able to allow them to physically imagine that they are present in, like for example, an oil refinery setting, and also challenge difficult scenario to replicate, such as a collapsed structure scenario, whereby it is highly difficult for us to replicate. And through this so-called experiential learning, right, we will allow them to be able to better understand how it is like to respond and practice some of their SOP. And another unique thing about this kind of learning is that they can repeatedly go through this type of scenarios. And from there, right, we always believe that they will be able to learn from their mistakes. And of course, another thing is that it is at a so-called extremely low risk situation. Besides that, we also actively use the VR training, right, to validate some of our response plan. And one of the key things that we are doing is to allow them to actually test some of the so-called contingency plans that we put in place for some of our major standby. And in the VR environment, right, we will be able to create this type of environment whereby, for example, like the F1 race, whereby we will allow them to actually test out some of these response procedures.
And if I may just add to what Suhan has mentioned, in terms of how VR training can translate to tangible operational outcomes, I think one aspect about translating to tangible operational outcomes, just imagine if you have got, if you are doing a major contingency planning scenario itself at a particular location, many times you need to bring your crew down to the ground for repeated recce's. And because of, if these venues are actually venues that are operating, say for instance, one of the major shopping malls, it will take up a lot of time. Okay, it will also inconvenience the premise owners many times over if you were to bring a big crew down. By having this environment in the virtual environment itself, a lot of this planning can actually be done virtually. Familiarization of different areas itself can be done virtually. Another aspect that I would highlight is that, for instance, when you're doing training, okay, say road traffic accident training itself on how to do extrication from vehicles. Typically, one of the things that we do right now is that we bring on board actual live vehicles, okay, for our trainees to actually cut and extract casualties from. But of course, by doing so, this also means that we need to commit to only different types of vehicles. If we have this in the VR environment itself, we can apply it to many different types of vehicles itself, not just a car, SUV, trucks, buses, which may be difficult to obtain. So I think VR actually really allows us to practice in many of the more complex, difficult to obtain scenarios and equipment itself. And this will translate to operational outcomes.
Yeah. Thank you, sir. We have a question from the audience. May I just read out the third question? It says that, do you notice an increase in members taking advantage of training during the COVID-19 pandemic due to the availability of distance or remote options? This is open to the entire panel.
Okay, let me just have a quick look at the questions again. So it's increase in members of public taking advantage of training during pandemic. Well, I think that currently the pandemic has changed many things, especially the training landscape. Because of the difficulty in getting people itself to come together, I think this has strongly and quickly accelerated the movement of people adopting learning in an online environment itself. And yes, I do agree that many members of public are increasingly coming on board itself and learning to learn in a new way, learning to learn on online platforms. One of the things that we notice about people is that many people are quite resistant to change. technology could have been available, but yet, because we are so used to a conventional way of doing things, we may not adopt it. My personal experience tells me one thing, we used to have many seminars and webinars itself. We used to have many seminars conducted in live training workshops, where we get people from various countries to come in to speak. But because of the pandemic, we have rapidly evolved into doing things on an online manner because there's no way that we can meet in person. So we have done some of this in webinar form, just like what we're doing right now. Yeah, this would not be something that would have been that widely adopted if the pandemic has not forced us to adapt this change. And so I do agree, yes, many people are increasingly taking advantage, of adopting online learning, and the pandemic has changed many behaviors, and training is just one of them.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Colonel Lee, maybe you can elaborate on our home team learning management system, where our respondents in the fire stations are actually learning virtually in their fire station. Maybe you can elaborate more on that.
Okay, the home team management learning system actually is an online system that allows our home team officers to tap on the various e-learning modules that is put in place for us to revise on specific topics. And it is a system that also allows us to not only learn, but also track the so-called the performance. And from there, I also understand that it's a so-called a program that is designed to look into the different specific areas of the learning path of a home team officers.
Thank you, sir. Indeed, within the force and also out of the force, we have many technologies that we are utilizing to actually bridge this remote learning during this COVID-19 pandemic. Let's move on to the next question that is being posed by the audience. The fourth question is, how can VR training complement community engagement efforts in enhancing citizens' emergency preparedness and readiness? This is open to the entire panel.
So what do you want to take this question?
Yeah, okay, for the community, right, the same thing actually allows them to do is to be able to experience certain so-called risk or threat that may happen in a community in the virtual world. So one good example is that they may be able to expose to like a situation whereby there's an air raid, or maybe even a gunman attack by terrorists. And then in this virtual environment, they will be able to learn or practice skills such as the initiative or the things that we promote in the SG Secure movement. Like, for example, the run, hide, tell. And also give them another opportunity to also practice things like, for example, in-place protection, and what are the things that they need to do when they are within a shelter environment. So in the VR so-called environment, right, it opens a lot of other possibilities that we will not be able to do in the current setting.
I think I just want to add on to what Suhan has actually mentioned. The application of VR training in community engagement itself is really no different from use for our responders. The same scenario that has been created itself for our training with our emergency responders can actually be translated to the community responders, but the outcomes are different. What we intend for our trainees itself is to practice SOPs, but for the community engagement portion itself is to give them an immersive experience of what can actually happen. Yeah, and because if they have a better understanding of what are the kind of problems and environment that they may be faced with, it may lead to increased desire itself to learn more about certain civil defense skills. Yeah, and I think that's where it can be applied. Yeah, in many ways.
Thank you, sir.
All right.
We shall take one last question from the audience.
Of course.
So the last question is, are there plans to enable the units and divisions within SCDF to adopt VR in enhancing training at workplace?
Yes, definitely. So one of the things that we are developing under Sun Huat's outfit in the Respondent Performance Center is the Virtual Learning Lab. Within the Virtual Learning Labs itself, there are two main types of VR systems that we are looking at. Okay, in our own terminology, we call them fixed systems and mobile VR suites. Okay, so fixed systems are things like the ACTS, where where you visit in the video itself, where you have to physically do it at a particular site because the system is too big to transport around. All right, driving simulators are other fixed systems. Yeah, we have got mobile suites. Mobile suites are small mobile suites that we can bring around to enhance VR training, and this would be loaned to the divisions if necessary. One good example that is already in practice today at the academy itself is the fire investigation virtual reality learning suite. So it comprises of a Pelican case, okay, 2 sensor posts itself, and a laptop, and of course your VR goggle and the controllers. Within this virtual reality environment itself, this whole suite can just be carried to any place and set up. So right here, right now, if let's say we have the system over here itself, it takes between 20 to 30 minutes to set up, and we can do the training actually on site over here. So the intent for the SCDF in adopting our virtual reality training is not to confine just to fixed systems. We are also moving towards having more mobile options itself that allow us to bring this to the different units. Of course, there are limitations. The limitations would be that the complexity that can be replicated in these mobile suites itself will not be able to mirror that of the fixed systems. But it's good to have a mix of these different options. And over time, we intend to roll out some of this even at the division HQs. To supply such equipment to every single fire station itself may not be feasible because of the cost that's involved. But we will definitely look at different ways itself where these sets can be circulated and loaned to the different units so that you don't always have to come to CDA for the training.
Thank you, sirs. We have covered our last question, and it is actually time for us to wrap up the session. So thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for attending this community session. We hope that you find it insightful and inspiring. It has indeed been our pleasure to present this topic on virtual reality and the future of training for emergency responders to you. Thank you and have a pleasant day.
Thank you very much for having us.
Thank you.